Now, our first guest, and I'm so excited about this, our first guest of the evening is a graduate of Wofford College in South Carolina and former criminal justice professor at Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina. He's working to change the way young black men are viewed and, more importantly, how they view themselves. His weapon of choice, information. He is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Delaware. His research study entitled Contextualizing Black Boys, Use of a Street Identity, Why Black Boys Use Street Life as a Site of Resiliency in High School. A 7-part series you can view on YouTube is an in-depth look into the mind of today's youth as it relates to their fascination and emulation of street life and how it's related to the educational system. This member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated is truly one of the most extraordinary men I have ever met in my life, and he is here today to talk about his life, his research, and his future. Please welcome to the show my great friend, Mr. Soon-to-be Dr. Brian Chad Starks is in the building. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Gail, what an intro. What an intro. I do appreciate that.
Well, welcome to the show, and I want to personally thank you for taking the time to come on the show and share your story.
Of course, I appreciate the opportunity. Shouts out to you and Clark for doing for having this forum open for folks like me to be able to come share some of my research interests and also share some of the voices that I've come into contact with when I began this research academic journey that I'm on right now. And it's very important that we get some of these voices, we bring them to life and bring them on the front stage, because some folks don't have the opportunity like I've been blessed with to get their voices heard. So I see myself as a conduit of information, but also representing the folks that don't have the opportunity like I do. So that means a lot.
Right, and you know, I mean, and you've heard me often refer to you as the next Martin, Malcolm, you know, the next one to come up. And I want to go back to the day that we met.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I saw you, there was this man, this dark-skinned man. He had street clothes on. He had dreads down to his shoulders. He talked with slang. And my first impression was, well, I'm going to say that on the air, but my first impression was not a positive one, I must say. Like, I actually really feel like you cannot truly judge a book by its cover. I would have never thought in a million years when I saw you that you were a professor in an institution of higher learning or, you know, running a successful bail bonds company. And as intellectual as you are, which, you know, is a good segue into, you know, what you're doing and what your research is all about. Because it is, you know, I think one of the problems that black men face is that first impression based on appearances.
You're exactly right. And, well, with me personally, I've always used the element of surprise to confuse folks, not maliciously, but it just sometimes things just fall into your hand because of the way society has put labels on us and definitions and operationalized what exactly a young black man should look like, as well as young black women, young white women, young white men, and other nationalities and ethnicities. But the thing about being young and black in this society in this day, it's tough. It's very tough on the females, not being gender biased here. But a young black male has to deal with the historical analysis of what we represent in society back then, now, and what we will represent in the future. And one of the things that I learned growing up in Columbia, South Carolina, being a product of the dirty, is that I'm responsible for whatever comes out of my mouth. as a young black man. So one thing that I was very, very focused on doing, and I had great teachers, fill up your head before you open your mouth, and the rest is history. It's almost like a Lil Wayne analogy. He's not the best rapper, but what he does is he floods the gate with great work. He continues. When you can do 200 songs in a year, then they're going to be forced to listen to you. I pushed the envelope, and I pushed the envelope through education to force people that I wouldn't have an opportunity to hear my voice to actually listen to me. And I think that's a gift. And that led me into defining and working with young black men that I know that are facing some of the discontent in situations that I've been faced with. So it's not really separate from me, which I think I'm blessed because a lot of people go to work and it's separate from their lives. This is who I am. I'm only following the blueprint that was laid out for me before I got here.
Well, can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and and how you came to be where you are now?
Well, I'm born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina. Proud graduate of Columbia High School, and I love to let folks know that I graduated from high school when every 26 seconds right now in some urban city around this nation, a young black man is being kicked out of school. And I think now with the emergence of technology and the focus on graduate college degrees, that we're forgetting that some young men have not even graduated from high school. We can talk about that later, where they're ending up. But I really want to preface this entire thing by saying I'm a high school graduate before we get to the other accolades. After high school, I was fortunate enough I earned a scholarship. I went to play football at a small liberal arts college, predominantly white school in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Worked for the Spartanburg Alcohol and Drug Abuse Commission for about 7 months after that as a drug and alcohol prevention specialist, where I went out to the communities, mostly black, and talked about the effects of alcohol and drugs on you, your community, the family, more like a responsibility type situation. Left there, went back to graduate school, just wasn't happy being on soft money. It was a grant field position. Went back to graduate school at University of South Carolina, earned a master's degree in criminal justice as well as a master's certificate in alcohol and drug studies. And then I opened up I started the first juvenile drug court. I did research as an intern working on the first master's on the type of crimes and the number of crimes committed in 3 counties in the state of South Carolina that were alcohol and drug related for juveniles. They enjoyed the research. I submitted a proposal, started the first juvenile drug court, which offers alcohol and drug defendants options in lieu of going to prison. That worked out pretty well for me. They promised me some money, and they didn't give me the money because the program was a success, and I walked out of the door. I went back to school to finish up one of those certifications, and I started my own bail bonding company in 1999, and I ran that for 6.5 years. And my second year in the business, I was offered an opportunity to be a full-time instructor at Benedict College teaching criminal justice. And that's where the academic track really got started for me in understanding the purpose and the gifts that I've been blessed with and the ones that I was supposed to give away. I fell in love with teaching. There was nothing like the power and the responsibility of standing up in front of young minds, young spirits, young hearts that were expecting me to educate them. It empowered me from a selfish perspective, but also gave me a sense of accountability and responsibility, and I didn't take it lightly. I wanted to spread everything that I had absorbed to my students, and that's what I'm doing now. Life is about service, so you're supposed to absorb all you can and wring out even more. So fortunate to be in the position. After starting the bonding company and teaching, I just stayed hungry. It wasn't enough. And I had friends and family that said, man, you're making the money, you're doing this, you're doing good here. Why isn't this enough? But internally, I wasn't self-gratified by making the money and just teaching on that level. I actually felt guilty because I only had a master's degree, and I didn't think I was preparing our black students. Benedict is a historically black college. I didn't think I was preparing them to compete with the other students in the state of South Carolina for graduate school opportunities or professional career opportunities. So I made my mind up that I wasn't going to cheat me or cheat them, and I left and moved to Delaware, closed my bail bonding business, resigned from teaching to come get the PhD, and here I sit.
Clark?
Yeah, I'm writing notes. Let me write my notes.
I know I
Brian.
gave you a lot, brother, so, wherever you want to jump in, just jump in.
Well, Brian, I first want to say, man, I'm so happy Gil was able to work it out where you would be on this show. I'm currently working in a series called Why Not Now for Teens, and we're trying to reach out to our teenage males to empower them in ways that they aren't and pour into them about entrepreneurial spirits. And to hear you talk about this, man, is so encouraging. It lets me know that I'm on the right track and that there are other soldiers out there that are fighting the good fight and haven't given up on our youth, man. And, man, I'm so happy to hear the things you're doing.
Oh, man, Clark, bless you too, brother, for fighting the fight and believing in the young folks. If I may interject real quick, I really want the listeners to understand that we're doubted. Young black men are doubted even before they present themselves, open their mouths to get an opportunity to defend themselves. They're in the negative. If we're going to do a scale of negative to positive, we're already working from behind the 8 ball. And it doesn't make sense, in the research, what I'm talking about in that 7-part series about the lifestyles of coping to structural inequality, it gets passed down. And what I mean by structural inequality is poor neighborhoods, poor schools, poor health care, no job opportunities. And that struggle and that fight generationally over the last 200-300 years have been passed down, along with the degradation, the psychological beatdown that you ain't nothing. You're going to be just like your daddy. You ain't going to never be this. Boy, you crazy to think you want to be a lawyer. And I don't blame my fathers, my uncles, my aunts, my cousins, my sisters or brothers. I just want to make them aware of the responsibility and the impact that we have when we say those things to young black men. For some reason, we think crime and prison just started because a 14-year-old kid has his pants sagging, listen to Young Jeezy and smoking marijuana. They are to blame for the disproportionate representation of young black men in prison. Now, you're really going to put that on a 14-year-old? No, what we're doing is you're avoiding the mirror. You're not looking at your responsibility and how you've contributed to this because you have accepted the Western ideology of viewing young black men. In itself, what's written in these schools, in public schools, the historical analysis in college, earning bachelor's degrees, is the same historical context of a negative connotation about young black men. So you take living day to day, and you see a young white female when you pull up at the red light, and she rolls her windows up when she looks over at you. This happens to me. And I look at her, and when I was younger, it used to just make me mad. But as I got older and started learning the historical degradation to us and the separation that's been done on purpose, if she has not met me, grown up interacting with me in her neighborhood, in her community, in her school, gets to college, everything that's written about us does not highlight me as being a professor. We aren't seen in positions of authority. We aren't seen in positions to impact everyone. We're painted as thugs. Who knows what that definition means? Criminal. We're going to talk about how crime got racialized later on. I know we're going to do that. But those are the connotations that are directly attached to young black men. So why shouldn't she be afraid of me when she sees my long dreadlocks and my dark skin?
I was.
Exactly. But we unconsciously, we don't realize what we're doing to the young men. And let's say, young ladies, we do want spouses. So we're working against each other in this thing. It's sad. One thing that I do, I'm trained in this program called Inside Out, and I got trained to go in prison. I take my University of Delaware students into a prison, and I have 15 university students and 15 incarcerated folks, and we have class together in the prison. The most powerful class I have ever been a part of. There's a whole lot of logistic conversation and protecting the identity of the folks, but we don't let them use terms like prisoner, inmate. And we're feeding into the psyche of the negative connotations of terminology. And you would be amazed to see, once you start to strip those and you call everyone students, how we all on the same playing field.
Yeah, exactly.
Your story, my story, we got something to add in the classroom. In our community, we aren't uplifting each other, especially young black men. We're not telling them the value of their story. We're not telling them about the drug center that I'm a research assistant for, making $10 million off their stories by sending me into the prison and interviewing young brothers about the effects of alcohol and drugs on their life. We're not telling them how you can package that yourself and make your book a bestseller, how you can get on the circuit and go around speaking about your story. It's our story that is profiting the country. Prisons are a huge industry, and black and brown men are the ones that are filling these beds. But you can get a PhD like me, you can get a grant from the National Institute of Justice, and you can go out and you can study them, you can get them $5, and then you can come out and make a book, and now you can make your career. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we are rejecting. We are rejecting treating our community as a stepping ladder for our careers. We're going to uplift. We're going to use that old cliche, cream rises to the top. Mm-hmm. We're going to spend time with the females in the community saying, hey, yeah, have you ever thought about saying something positive to him, how that could impact him and you? We understand that you made a decision, father is whatever, but can we understand the degradation and the impact on a 10-year-old kid when you take his dreams away? Oprah Winfrey had a show on Good Morning America, and she had kids from the age of 3 to 7 on the show from all around the country about 3 years ago. And she went around the country, and most of these kids were from third world countries, of course, that they were poor. And she asked those children, what did they want to be when they grew up? These kids wanted to be dignitaries. These kids wanted to be presidents of their country. Mm. And I mean, it bothered me because I realized at that time we socialized them into the isms, to the classisms, to the racisms, to the sexisms, that we take their dreams away by saying, hey, boy, you poor and black from East Point. You can't be that. From College, you can't be that. You need to be from Alpharetta in order for you to be that. And that happens. It's amazing what happens after you start attending public school and how your dreams change, especially for young black men.
Well, I want to know. I want to ask you, what do you mean now? In your study, you mentioned the 3 ideology dimensions, and I want you to touch a little bit on that, as well as what you call both ands.
Okay.
You say in the study that these men can still believe in God, yet
all day
in illegal activity. So if you could touch on the 3 ideology dimensions and a little bit about both ands, and let the listeners know what you're talking about.
All right, the ideology of street life is broken down into 3 different parts. And what we're saying in this ideology of street life is that it is passed on. The understanding of street life is passed on from black man to black man through generations. So what I've learned, I've actually received from my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, because he passed it on to the great-great-great-great-grandfather and so forth. The second part of the ideology is the more connected to it, the more ground into the code of the streets, then the more resilient you will be. And what we mean by resilient is we see crime as a coping mechanism for those structural inequalities that I was talking about. Not having a job. How am I going to eat? Charles Darwin comes back into play, survival of the fittest. You can take all these variables that I'm talking about, no jobs, bad schools, no education, and you can put them in any country, in any nation, any time of existence, and the result is going to be what? Crime. And that's one thing we like to do is I like to give the historical context to remind people that young black men aren't the first ones to do crime. They're responding to the structural conditions that they see every day outside of their windows. It's a coping mechanism. I am not excusing accountability, but it is a coping mechanism for not having resources. The third part of the ideology is used for personal and economic survival. And that's where you start getting into, the set of activities that helps define street life. So you may see robbing, illegal activities, robbing, selling drugs, hustling, number running, pimping. You may see that. But you're also going to see the bonding activities that these men do, joking, playing the dozens. I'm born and raised from the South, so Negro League baseball games were huge when I was growing up. I mean, just the education and the life lessons I got from being on the back of the truck with my uncles and listening to them tell stories about life, let alone the baseball game, I still use those to further my education and to drop knowledge on young kids now. So these are all, we move from what's called like an assets base in the community where most folks would like to go in and just only focus on what's negative. But why don't we focus on what's positive and bring those to life? So those are the three parts of the ideology of street life. Both and, right? What we talk about when we're saying both and is that I can today sell drugs, understanding for good or for bad, understanding the coping mechanism. I can sell drugs today in this community, and tomorrow I can walk the elderly women across the street to church or to the grocery store or host a barbecue. That doesn't mean that they are devils, because if you understand the coping mechanism and the resiliency, it doesn't change that value system that they've been given as young black men. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. You can hear Young Jeezy say all the time, I mean, not all the time, but in his song, about how conflicted he was when he was selling dope and his mama was addicted to it.
Oh, wow.
These are real stories these young black men are going through. You know what I mean? I mean, can you fathom having to come in the house with your package, with the money you done made, but at the same time hiding the package and deciding how much money you're going to put in the house because young black men going to take care of mama? That's both and. And that's a psychological struggle. Man, I don't know what's worse, because I'm selling the dope or because my mama addicted to it. It's not as easy as we would like to portray them as being an outcast or the devil or the bad person. And I don't believe, and this is up, of course, for argument, that if we give them other resources and other options and believe in them, then we might get different results.
Hey, you're absolutely right. Prof, I want to ask you this. We did a little reading, and I know you have a saying that you repeat to your students: wherever you shine the most light on, you will find the most dirt.
Yes,
Brother,
sir.
I would like for you to explain to our listeners as that saying relates to racializing crime, and also where racializing crime actually comes from, if you would.
Right. All right, I'm going to work backwards with you, Clark, okay?
Okay.
We're going to go back to the 60s real quick, and we're going to talk about, first of all, we're going to talk about civil rights, okay? The purpose of civil rights was to make non-white folks a part of the American culture, correct? And one thing that I always want people to understand, if we were already included in constitutional rights, then we wouldn't have needed amendments or civil rights. So you got to understand the historical context that we were not included in being American citizens and being afforded rights that whites were afforded from Jump Street. So we can talk about emancipation and all that, what Abe Lincoln did, and we can talk about civil rights getting into the 60s. That didn't happen until the conversation with Dr. King and Malcolm X and what they were doing. I really want us to understand that. Now, moving from the Civil Rights Act, President Kennedy comes to be involved with minorities. And we love President Kennedy, don't we? Because President Kennedy was a white Irish Catholic that really, really, really held down African Americans, right? Wrong. It was a political ploy because he realized that the Russians were not comfortable with the way Americans were treating other Americans that happened to be black Americans. So what President Kennedy was very, 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 very conscious of, they were going to ruin trade relationships with Russia, which would impact other international trade relationships if they didn't do something for the blacks. So he was the one that started the Economic Opportunities Act, fighting for civil rights, housing, employment. President Kennedy got that. We backed him. He didn't do what he was going to say. We let him down. We stopped supporting him. He sends the military into University of Arkansas to protect the first black folks, black man and black female that ever go to school there. You know we're the most forgiving race there is. So we jumped on the bandwagon again. So President Kennedy gets elected. Lyndon B. Johnson is the assistant, the vice. He gets assassinated. Lyndon B. Johnson steps up. He continues with the program. Dr. King gets assassinated in 1968. Now you get the race riots across the country. Because of the race riots, Lyndon B. Johnson gets nervous as a Democrat and says, I'm not running for office next year. President Nixon, who runs for office that year, used the assassination of Dr. King to say crime is happening because of the black people rioting. They said arrest rates went up. They blamed that on us. Before that, criminal was the terminology. After the riots and running for presidency, which was his platform, crime became racialized because of our response to the assassination of Dr. King. From that day forward, in the 70s, crime became racialized as a black and brown problem. And if you go check the incarceration rates in prison, now you start seeing different people entering the prison. And those people are us.
And, Brian, I wanted to, since you brought that up, I wanted, because we're starting to run out of time, but I want to get a few things in there before you go. Can you please tell the listeners about the article that you have hanging in your office about the state of South Carolina schools versus jails, and what the statistic for likelihood? What is the current statistic for the likelihood of black men over the age of 18 to be institutionalized, incarcerated?
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna finish up with the comment that he made. He wanted me to talk about. Well, in Michelle Alexander's new book called The New Jim Crow, she talks about the federal government choosing what neighborhoods they wanted to seek out that had drugs in them. These same drugs were in the suburbs. These same drugs were in private schools. But they hired more police, and the media pursued poor black communities because it was purpose-driven. So that's where I term that phrase, wherever you shine the brightest light, you're going to find the most dirt. You can follow us all for a certain amount of time, and we'll be off-center from being in the middle. That's just human nature. Things happen. So if you put more police in this impoverished community where folks are responding with crime as a coping mechanism, of course you're going to make more arrests. And, of course, you're going to report that to the federal government as this is a crime community. But you're not going over to Alpharetta and with the same amount of police in the suburbs to see the cocaine that's been distributed there at much higher rates than it is on the corner of a $5 hit of crack. All right, Gail, secondly, now, the article I have up in, I came home one weekend, and country boy like I am, southern boy, I'm sorry, eating my grits and drinking my Welch's grape juice. I read the newspaper at my mom's house, and they have missing black men in South Carolina colleges. There are 3 public schools, College of Charleston, Clemson, and University of South Carolina, combined, didn't have 3% total black men enrolled in their schools. That same age demographic that should have been in school represented 69% of the prison population for the state of South Carolina. That's where your brothers are.
69%?
69% were locked up.
In college.
That college age.
Mm-hmm.
Less than 3% were enrolled in Clemson, University of South Carolina, and the College of Charleston.
Wow.
So that's a school. So what we're doing is understanding this school-to-prison pipeline when you start having the conversation about every 26 seconds a young black man is kicked out of school. Notice I didn't say drop out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't use that terminology. You're being forced out of school. If you come to school and you're sleeping and your teacher comes by, says nothing to you but sends you to the office, she didn't even inquire to say, well, Brian, why are you sleeping in class? Because that unconscious bias has a negative connotation with a young black man sleeping in class. Instead of asking them, well, baby, what's wrong? Not knowing he may be up all night hustling, trying to feed his 2 little brothers and sisters. It doesn't mean he don't care about education. It doesn't mean that. We used to have a system before we segregated our schools where our teachers wouldn't allow that. How do I know that? Because my mother went to those schools. They wouldn't allow you. They wouldn't send you home. Sending kids home is not the answer to disciplinary issues. What are you supposed to do when you go home? That's an easy way out, and that's what we've done. So it's easy to stack these blocks against young black men and say, y'all deal with them, y'all deal with them. And now we're just creating a system where we're warehousing each other for nonviolent offenses. Most of the people in prison today are in prison for nonviolent offenses, and those offenses are drugs. Flat out.
Wow. Now, like I said, we're running out of time, but and so I want to wrap up. But before you go, tell everyone what your plans are after you complete your doctorate. Are you going to be teaching, lecturing on the lecture circuit, or both? And what is your ultimate goal that you hope to accomplish, and how can people, follow your work?
I just accepted an assistant professor position at Delaware State University. So I will be teaching for that university starting in the fall. I'm going to be lecturing, hopefully around the country. Consider myself as a public intellectual. You know, I do this thing called copy and paste. I want to take everything that I get here through my research, through my experiences, and I want to bring it back to the streets. I want to bring it back to the folks that aren't privy to what I'm privy to. I'm writing a dissertation now about bail operation procedures, actually in Atlanta. I spent time in Atlanta in Fulton County in the court system down there talking about how decisions are made for folks that get arrested. I actually want to create a street-level bail guide for everyone in Atlanta. I want them to know what we know as professionals. They're the ones that decisions are being made on. So I really want to do a public intellectual thing in addition to academia. I'm going to be speaking at conferences. As soon as I get over my shyness, I'm going to create a documentary about some of this work that I've been doing as well.
Shyness, I love it.
Now,
as far as following,
are you getting on social media?
That's the shyness I'm talking about. I'm not exactly sure if I can do Twitter or Facebook. I don't have either one of those accounts. But I'm always available through email or phone calls. I'm still old school. I really prefer to hear your voice.
Well,
I'm a passionate young man, so, you know, I don't mind people having access directly to me. It's not that type of party, you know?
Well, tell everyone how they can get in touch with you then.
Oh, bstarks04@gmail.com. bstarks04@gmail.com. My ultimate goal, I know it's cliche, but I want to flood the gates in education for young men like me. I want to change the verbiage that's been written about our community. I want to change history. I want the words to change that define black men in high school, elementary, middle, daycare, college. I want those books to read differently about our communities.
Amen.
And I'm in a position to do that.
And I'm glad that with you being in your position, that you are, taken to the streets and spreading the knowledge for change and invoking change. And we're going to have you back on the show because 45 minutes just wasn't enough.
It was. I do want to let everyone know too. Also, the ATL lovers of Young Jeezy. Me and my partner. This is my partner in research named Dr. Yasser Arafat Payne. He and I work very closely together. But we got a paper out entitled "Gangsta Rap's Response to Poverty in the Black Community," and we use Young Jeezy's The Recession album and coded all his lyrics for socio-political themes, and we wrote a academic paper about it. We're trying to get it published in the academic journal.
Well, we'll definitely be looking out for that and everything else that you're doing. We are definitely looking forward to witnessing you in action. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really been a pleasure having you, and you don't sound that shy on the radio. I just have to.
Well, you can't give me a mic and ask me to talk, but the shyness is there. Before
All
I go,
right,
let me
well,
say
thanks.
Gail, Clark, thank y'all for what y'all doing. Seriously, yo. It means a whole lot for folk like me to have our chance to voice what's really going on in the world. So y'all keep doing what you're doing, and the folks will always hold you down.